I never imagined that a routine doctor's appointment would shatter my entire world, but that's exactly what happened on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday in September. "Mr. Miller, please have a seat," Dr. Abrams said, his face unreadable as I settled into the chair across from his desk. The antiseptic smell of the examination room suddenly felt suffocating. "Everything okay, Doc? Just need that clean bill of health for my insurance." I smiled, trying to lighten the strange tension I sensed. He cleared his throat, shuffling papers that I now realized were my test results. "James, there's something we need to discuss." He rarely used my first name, which immediately sent a chill down my spine. "Your blood work is fine. Your cholesterol is actually better than last year, but—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "There's an anomaly in some of your hormone levels that prompted me to run additional tests." "No, nothing like that," he assured me. "But the tests indicate a condition called azoospermia. It means you produce no viable sperm. Based on the structure we're seeing and your medical history, you've likely had this condition since birth." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "Doc, that's impossible. I have 3 kids." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he looked at me with what I now recognize was pity. "James, I've reviewed your history thoroughly. This isn't a new development. This is a congenital condition." "But my children—" My voice trailed off as the implications began to sink in. "I would suggest genetic counseling, perhaps," he said gently, "but medically speaking, it would be biologically impossible for you to father children naturally." The room started spinning. 3 children, Emma, William, and Sophia, all with my dark hair, all calling me Daddy. 15 years of marriage to Vanessa. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays. My entire life flashed before my eyes like some cruel montage. "There must be a mistake," I insisted, my voice rising. "Run the tests again." I don't remember leaving the doctor's office. I don't remember driving home. But I remember sitting in my car in our driveway, staring at our 2-story suburban home with its neatly trimmed lawn and the basketball hoop I'd installed for William's 10th birthday last year. The home where I'd lived a lie without even knowing it. Inside, Vanessa would be preparing dinner. Tuesday was pasta night, a tradition stretching back to when we were dating in college. 15 years. 3 children that weren't mine. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Everything okay at the doctor? Dinner in 20. I typed back. "All good. Traffic. Be home soon." The first conscious lie in what would become a campaign of deception. My shield as I uncovered the truth. When I finally walked through the door, Sophia ran to me, her 7-year-old arms wrapping around my waist. "Daddy! I got an A on my science project!" I hugged her tightly, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, suddenly hyper-aware of every feature on her face. Did she have my eyes, as everyone always said? Or had I been seeing what I wanted to see? Vanessa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 41, she was still beautiful, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, laugh lines crinkling around her green eyes that none of our children had inherited, because they weren't our children, were they? Fine. Just routine stuff, I lied, searching her face for any sign, any tell that might reveal she'd been living a double life. But she just smiled and turned back to the kitchen. "Yes. Emma's at volleyball until 7. William's upstairs doing homework." Normal. Everything was so brutally, painfully normal. Dinner was a blur. I nodded at appropriate times, asked about homework, complimented the food I could barely taste, all while my mind raced through possibilities. A lab error? A medical miracle? Or the most obvious answer: Vanessa had cheated on me. Not once, but 3 times. Or with the same man 3 times. Or continuously for our entire marriage. Who was he? Someone I knew? A colleague? A friend? The questions burned through my brain like acid as I robotically twirled pasta on my fork. I nodded. Sure. My mother-in-law, who had always said William had my walk, my mannerisms, another person who either couldn't see the truth or was complicit in hiding it. That night, after the kids were in bed, I stood in the doorway of William's room. At 12, he was already showing signs of the man he would become. His room was plastered with soccer posters and science fair ribbons. I taught him how to throw a baseball, how to solve complex math problems, how to be honorable. I believed he carried my blood, my legacy. William stirred in his sleep, and I quietly closed his door before moving to the bathroom. I opened the medicine cabinet and found his toothbrush. Then I took a clean plastic bag from my pocket. I'd stopped at the drugstore on the way home and sealed the toothbrush inside. The next day, I left work early, driving 2 towns over to a private laboratory I'd found online. They specialized in paternity testing, no questions asked. I paid in cash and left William's toothbrush along with my own DNA sample. Results typically take 3 to 5 business days, the technician told me. We'll email them to the address you provided. 5 days of living in limbo. 5 days of watching Vanessa, searching for clues I might have missed over 15 years. 5 days of hugging my children, or the children I had raised, wondering if the truth would destroy them as much as it was destroying me. On the 5th day, the email arrived while I was at work. I closed my office door, hands shaking as I clicked open the attachment. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Then another line caught my attention. Probability of close biological relation to child, 25%. Not just any man, a blood relative. My brother? My father? The bile rose in my throat. Thighs. I wiped my eyes, straightened my tie, and walked out to my secretary's desk. Clara, I need to take the rest of the day off. Family emergency. The drive home was a fog of rage and grief. I kept seeing Vanessa's face, imagining her with someone else, someone from my own family. 15 years of memories became tainted, corrupted by this new knowledge. But I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know everything first. I needed to be certain beyond any doubt. Because once I spoke the words aloud, nothing would ever be the same again. Khaman Makhan. For the next week I lived a double life. By day I was James Miller, devoted husband and father. I went to work, attended William's soccer games, helped Emma with college applications, read bedtime stories to Sophia. But beneath the surface, I was burning with questions, with rage, with an overwhelming sense of betrayal that threatened to consume me. The 25% biological relation haunted me. It meant whoever fathered my children was a first-degree relative, a father, son, or brother. My father had died when I was in college, long before I met Vanessa. I was an only child except for Daniel, my half-brother from my father's first marriage. 10 years older than me, we'd never been close, but we'd maintained a cordial relationship. He lived just 30 minutes away, worked at the same company as Vanessa years ago, before she became a full-time realtor. He'd always been at our family gatherings, always been unusually interested in the kids. The night I made the connection, I locked myself in the garage under the pretense of organizing tools and unleashed my fury on a punching bag I hadn't used in years. Each blow was accompanied by images. Daniel at Emma's birth, Daniel teaching William to ride a bike when I was away on business, Daniel holding Sophia at her christening. Had he been laughing at me the entire time? Oh. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to a technology store in another county. I purchased a GPS tracker and a high-quality voice recorder. Another stop at a specialty shop added a program that would allow me to monitor Vanessa's text messages. I felt sick doing it, but the need to know overpowered any moral qualms. That evening, I casually asked Vanessa about her day as I slipped the tracker into her purse. Busy showings all day, she replied, stirring a pot of chili. That lakefront property finally got an offer. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Not since your birthday last month. Why? I assumed so. You could text him. She smiled. And for a moment, I almost believed I was wrong. Almost. 3 days later, my surveillance yielded results. Vanessa's car stopped at a location that wasn't on her list of property showings, a mid-range hotel on the outskirts of town. She was there for exactly 58 minutes before heading to her next legitimate appointment. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vanessa lay beside me, breathing softly while I stared at the ceiling, imagining her with my brother in that hotel room. Had it been going on our entire marriage? Were there other men too? The questions multiplied, each more painful than the last. Morning came, and I dragged myself to work, functioning on autopilot. My assistant Clara kept giving me concerned looks. James, are you sure you're all right? You look like you haven't slept in days. I'm fine, I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. Sorry, Clara. Just some personal stuff. I nearly laughed. What would I say? My wife has been sleeping with my brother and passed off his children as mine for 15 years. Instead, I thanked her and closed my office door. I needed more proof before confronting either of them. I needed to be methodical, to gather evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. The weekend arrived, and Vanessa mentioned a Sunday property showing that had come up last minute. Quote, "The clients can only see it tomorrow afternoon. I'll just be gone a couple of hours." I nodded, already knowing the GPS tracker would tell me where she really went. Sure enough, Sunday afternoon found me sitting in a rental car across from the same hotel, watching as first Vanessa arrived. Then, 20 minutes later, Daniel's distinctive red Audi pulled into the parking lot. I took photos with a telephoto lens as they left separately. 3 hours later, in one, they embraced briefly near her car, their faces clear in the afternoon sun. That night, when she returned home smelling of unfamiliar cologne, I somehow maintained my composure through dinner, through helping with homework, through our nighttime routine. But when she reached for me in bed, I couldn't bear her touch. The next day I met with a lawyer, bringing copies of the paternity test, the GPS logs, and the photos. "You've been thorough," Attorney Marshall said, reviewing the evidence. "With this documentation and the DNA test, you're in a strong position for divorce proceedings." His expression softened. "Legally, since you've been their father, in every way but biological for their entire lives, you'll still have parental rights. But it's complicated by the biological father being in the picture. The court will consider what's best for the children. Your history as their primary father figure counts for a lot." I left his office with a preliminary divorce strategy and an even heavier heart. That night, I sat the kids down while Vanessa was at a client dinner. "I want you all to know that I love you more than anything in this world," I told them, fighting to keep my voice steady. "No matter what happens in the coming weeks, that will never change." Emma, now 17 and perceptive, frowned. "Dad, you're scaring us. What's going on?" "Your mother and I are going through some things," I said carefully. "Adult things. But my love for you three is absolute and unchangeable." The direct question from my 12-year-old son, not my son, hit me like a physical blow. "I don't know yet, buddy. But if that happens, it won't be because of anything you did, and it won't change how much I love you." Sophia climbed into my lap, her small arms around my neck. "I don't want you to go away, Daddy." I held her tightly, tears threatening to spill. "I'm not going anywhere, Princess. I promise." Later that week, Vanessa was hosting a dinner party for her real estate colleagues and their spouses. Daniel was invited. He'd been dating one of Vanessa's coworkers, off and on. The perfect opportunity for my confrontation. The night of the party, I was calm, eerily calm. I helped Vanessa set up, greeted guests warmly, played the perfect host. Daniel arrived with his date, Lisa, giving me a brotherly clap on the shoulder. He didn't catch my meaning, moving on to greet others. Throughout dinner, I watched them. The occasional glance between Vanessa and Daniel, the careful distance they maintained, the practiced performance of casual acquaintances. After dessert, when everyone had moved to the living room with coffee and liqueurs, I stood up, tapping my glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "To family, to loyalty," I raised my glass toward Daniel. "To brotherhood." Confusion flickered across the faces around me. Vanessa was watching me warily. "I recently learned something interesting about myself," I continued conversationally. "Apparently I've been infertile since birth. A medical impossibility that I could father children." I turned to look directly at Vanessa, whose face had drained of color. "And yet, here I am, raising 3 beautiful children who call me Dad." The room had gone completely silent. Daniel was frozen, his glass halfway to his lips. "Imagine my confusion," I went on, my calm facade starting to crack. "Until I had some DNA tests done. Turns out, my children are related to me after all, through my dear brother Daniel." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Lisa was staring at Daniel in horror. "When is the time, Vanessa?" I demanded, my voice rising. "After 20 years of lies? 30? When exactly were you planning to tell me that my brother is the father of our children?" Daniel stood up, his face flushed. "James, let's talk about this privately. Like you two have been doing at the Lakeside Inn every Sunday for God knows how long?" I pulled out my phone, showing the screen with the GPS tracking data. "I have pictures, Daniel. I have DNA tests. I have 15 years of being made a fool of by the 2 people who should have loved me most." Vanessa was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Please, James, not like this. You're right, I agreed, suddenly tired. Not like this. The children are at my parents' house tonight. They'll stay there while I pack my things. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow. I walked to the door, turning back one last time to face the shocked room. Dinner was lovely, as always, Vanessa. Daniel, since these are apparently your children, you can start paying child support. I'll have my lawyer work out the details. As I reached for the doorknob, Daniel lunged at me, grabbing my shoulder and spinning me around. You self-righteous bastard, he snarled, swinging wildly at my face. Years of pent-up martial arts training kicked in automatically. I blocked his punch and countered with a sharp strike to his solar plexus, followed by a sweep that took his legs out from under him. As he fell, his head caught the edge of the console table with a sickening crack. Blood began to pool beneath his head as screams erupted around us. Someone called 911 as I stood there, watching my brother bleed on the floor of the home I'd built, surrounded by the remnants of the life I thought I had. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, temporary custody arrangements, and seismic shifts in every aspect of my life. I moved into a downtown apartment, seeing the children on weekends while the divorce proceedings began. Daniel had survived our altercation with a severe concussion and 20 stitches, but our relationship was irrevocably shattered. The hardest part was explaining to Emma, William, and Sophia what was happening without destroying their sense of identity. With the help of a family therapist, I told them a simplified version of the truth, that Uncle Daniel was actually their biological father, but that I had raised them and loved them as my own, which would never change. Their reactions varied wildly. Emma, nearly an adult, responded with cold fury toward her mother and Daniel, refusing to speak to either of them for weeks. William became withdrawn, his grades slipping as he processed the revelation. Sophia, too young to fully understand the implications, kept asking when we would all live together again. I'm so sorry this is happening, I told them, during one of our weekend visits, all of us crammed into my new apartment's living room. But I need you to know that being your dad has been the greatest privilege of my life. Biology doesn't change that. But you're not really our father, William said flatly, staring at the floor. The words cut deeper than any physical wound. William, look at me, I said, waiting until his eyes reluctantly met mine. Who taught you to ride a bike? Who stayed up all night when you had pneumonia in 3rd grade? Who coached your soccer team for 6 years? That's what being a father is, I told him, including all 3 in my gaze. It's showing up. It's loving unconditionally. It's putting someone else's needs before your own. Every single day. DNA is just chemistry. Family is a choice I make every morning when I wake up. I understand that anger, I said carefully. I've felt it too. But hatred will only hurt you in the long run. We're going to find a way through this together, with our dignity intact. But privately, away from the children, my resolve was hardening into something colder, more calculated. Vanessa and Daniel had stolen 15 years of my life with their deception. They had used me, laughed behind my back, built their happiness on the foundation of my ignorance. The rage I felt wasn't diminishing. It was transforming into determination. I began gathering more evidence methodically. I hired a private investigator who uncovered years of hotel receipts, phone records, and witnesses to their affair. I documented every penny I'd spent raising Daniel's children under false pretenses. I built a case not just for divorce, but for fraud. During this period, I discovered an unexpected ally, Lisa, Daniel's former girlfriend who had been at the dinner party. She reached out to me through a mutual friend, asking to meet for coffee. I had no idea, she said, her hands wrapped around her mug. I suspected he was seeing someone, but I never imagined. She trailed off, shaking her head. I'm so sorry, James. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. You were deceived, too. Lisa nodded, hesitating before adding, There's something else you should know. Before we dated, Daniel was engaged to another woman, Rachel. She broke it off suddenly, and he never explained why. I always wondered. This new information sent me back to the PI, who tracked down Rachel living in Seattle. When I called her, the story she told confirmed my growing suspicions about Daniel's character. He was cheating throughout our engagement, Rachel explained. I found messages on his phone from multiple women, including someone named Vanessa. When I confronted him, he became verbally abusive, threatening. I left that night and never looked back. The pieces were falling into place. Not only had Daniel and Vanessa betrayed me, but their affair had predated our marriage. It wasn't a one-time mistake or a recent development. It was a calculated, ongoing deception. Around this time, Lisa and I began spending more time together. What started as shared grieving over our respective betrayals evolved into genuine connection. One night, after dinner at my apartment, our conversation about Daniel and Vanessa led to a moment of intense eye contact that culminated in an unexpected, passionate kiss. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Maybe it's not. Or maybe it's exactly what we both need right now. That night marked the beginning of what we both acknowledged was primarily physical, a way to reclaim some power, to heal through connection, to feel something beyond the pain and anger that had dominated our lives. We were using each other, in a sense, but with full awareness and consent. "This is just between us," she said afterward, lying beside me in the darkness. A lifeboat in the storm. I agreed, though something about the arrangement felt uncomfortably familiar. Weren't we now engaging in our own form of deception? The thought troubled me, but not enough to end things with Lisa. The validation of being wanted, of being chosen, was too powerful to relinquish. Meanwhile, my investigation continued to uncover increasingly disturbing information. A recorded conversation between Daniel and Vanessa, obtained legally by the PI during a restaurant meeting, revealed that the deception went deeper than I had imagined. "He can never know," Vanessa had said, her voice clear on the recording. "Your mother would never forgive us." My mother? Shirley Miller had always been a dominant force in our family, especially after my father died. She had welcomed Vanessa into the family with unusual enthusiasm, had always seemed to favor Daniel despite his many shortcomings. But why would she be involved in this? I drove to my mother's house unannounced one Sunday afternoon, finding her in the garden she had tended meticulously since my childhood. "James," she said, removing her gardening gloves, "this is a surprise. The children aren't with you?" "No," I replied, studying her face. At 72, she was still formidable, her gray hair cut in a severe bob that framed sharp features. "I wanted to talk to you alone." She led me inside to the kitchen, where she poured iced tea without asking if I wanted any. "I assume this is about the divorce. Such an unfortunate situation." "Is that all it is to you? Unfortunate?" I set the glass down untouched. "Mother, did you know about Vanessa and Daniel?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Know what, exactly?" "That Daniel is the biological father of my children. That they've been having an affair for at least 15 years. That they've been lying to me my entire marriage." She took a measured sip of her tea. What a dramatic interpretation of events. She set down her glass with a precise movement. "And what good has that knowledge done you? Has it made you happier? Has it improved your life in any way?" Her response confirmed my suspicions. "You did know," I said softly, the betrayal cutting fresh. "How long?" "Since the beginning." "Since before the beginning," she replied, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. "James, you must understand. When you and Vanessa started dating in college, I saw how serious it was becoming. I knew how much you wanted a family. So you encouraged my brother to sleep with my girlfriend?" My voice rose incredulously. "I encouraged a solution to a problem you weren't even aware of," she corrected. "The doctors told your father and me when you were born that you would never father children. Your father wanted to tell you when you were older, but he died, and I thought it would be kinder to let you live normally." "There was nothing kind about this deception," I said through gritted teeth. "You could have told me before I married Vanessa. I could have considered adoption, sperm donation, honest options." "Would you have been satisfied with that?" she challenged. "Or would you have always wondered if Vanessa resented not having children that were at least partly hers? This way, you had your family. The children have your family's blood. Everybody won." "Except me," I said, standing up. "I lost 15 years to a lie. I lost my trust in the people I loved most. I lost the right to make informed choices about my own life." "You're being childish," she snapped. "What's done is done. The important thing now is to minimize the damage to the children." "No," I replied, heading for the door. "The important thing now is the truth. All of it. No matter who it hurts." I left my mother's house with a clarity I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. My mother, my brother, my wife, all conspiring to control my life while keeping me in ignorance. Their actions hadn't been born of love or protection, but of arrogance and deception. That night, I wrote letters to each of my children, telling them the complete truth in age-appropriate ways. I explained about my medical condition, about the conspiracy between their mother, Daniel, and their grandmother. I emphasized again that my love for them remained steadfast, and that I would always consider myself their father, regardless of biology. What matters now, I wrote, is that we move forward with honesty and respect for each other. Lies, no matter how well-intentioned, ultimately cause more pain than the truths they're meant to hide. I sealed the letters, not yet ready to deliver them, but finding peace in having written the words. Then, I called Lisa. "Because it's not the right path to healing for either of us," I replied. "We're using each other to hurt Daniel and Vanessa, to feel some control again. But that's not who I want to be anymore." There was a long pause before she sighed. "You're probably right, but for what it's worth, it wasn't just about hurting them for me." "I know. And in another life, maybe we could have been something real. But right now, I need to focus on myself and my children." After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, formulating the next phase of my plan. The confrontation at the dinner party had been impulsive, driven by raw emotion. What came next would be strategic, measured, and designed, not just to expose the truth, but to ensure justice, real justice, not revenge. The first step was filing formal legal papers accusing Daniel of alienation of affection and fraud. The second was arranging a meeting with all parties involved, Vanessa, Daniel, and my mother, to lay out exactly what would happen next. This time, I wouldn't be blindsided by anger. This time, I would be in control. I arranged the meeting at my lawyer's office, a neutral territory where emotions could be contained within professional boundaries. Attorney Marshall sat beside me as Vanessa, Daniel, and my mother filed in, each accompanied by their own legal representation. The tension in the room was palpable, like the air before a thunderstorm. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "I've asked you here because we need to resolve this situation efficiently, with minimal additional damage to the children." "We agree," Vanessa's lawyer interjected. "My client is open to a fair division of assets and reasonable custody arrangements." I smiled thinly. "That's only part of what we'll be discussing today." I placed 3 folders on the table, sliding one toward each of them. Inside, you'll find copies of everything I've discovered over the past 2 months. DNA tests confirming Daniel's paternity of all 3 children. Hotel receipts dating back 14 years. Phone records. Bank transfers between accounts belonging to Daniel and my mother that coincide with each of my children's births. My mother's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently as she paged through the documents with a stony expression. You'll also find statements from Rachel Chen regarding Daniel's history of infidelity, and from 2 former employees of Vanessa's real estate office confirming their knowledge of the affair. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence sink in. Most damning is the recording of a conversation between Daniel and Vanessa explicitly discussing the paternity arrangement and my mother's involvement. "Actually, he did," Attorney Marshall interjected smoothly. "The recording was made in a public restaurant where there is no expectation of privacy. Single-party consent laws apply," I continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Here's what's going to happen. We will proceed with the divorce. I will seek joint custody of the children, as I have been their father in every way that matters for their entire lives. There will be no alimony payments to Vanessa." I'm not finished. "Daniel will be legally established as the biological father of all 3 children and will be required to pay child support retroactively for 15 years with interest." Daniel's face reddened. "That's outrageous. You raised them. You agreed to." "I agreed to nothing." I cut him off coldly. "I was deceived into raising children I believe were biologically mine. You knew the truth and chose to lie to me every day while maintaining a sexual relationship with my wife." Turning to my mother, I continued, "As for you, Mother, I will be contesting your will to ensure that your estate is divided equally between your grandchildren, regardless of custody arrangements. The trust fund you established exclusively for Daniel will be legally challenged based on your demonstrable history of unjust enrichment at my expense." My mother's composed facade finally cracked. "You would drag this family through the courts, through the public eye? Think of the scandal, James. Think of the children." "I am thinking of the children," I replied firmly. "I'm thinking of the example I want to set for them, that honesty matters, that actions have consequences, that we don't allow people to hurt us without accountability, even if those people are family. I pulled out one final document. This is a proposed settlement agreement that gives each of you an opportunity to avoid public exposure. If you sign today, I will handle the divorce and custody arrangements as privately as possible. If not, I will pursue every legal avenue available to me, regardless of how public or messy it becomes. The room fell silent as they exchanged glances. Their lawyers huddled with them, whispering urgently about the implications of fighting versus settling. After 20 tense minutes, Vanessa was the first to speak. "James, can we talk privately for a moment?" I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped into an adjoining conference room, closing the door behind us. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. This woman I had loved, built a life with, had 3 children with, yet now seemed like a stranger. Why? I finally asked, the question that had haunted me for months. Why maintain the lie for so long? Why not just marry Daniel if that's who you wanted? She sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her 41 years. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said softly. "In the beginning, it was just a solution to a problem. Your mother approached me during our senior year of college, after we got engaged. She told me about your condition, said you'd be devastated if you knew you couldn't give me children. So instead of talking to me, letting me make my own choices, you decided to sleep with my brother. The first time was clinical, almost," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "Scheduled around my ovulation. Daniel and I didn't even like each other then. It was just a transaction. But it worked. I got pregnant with Emma. You were so happy." She hesitated. "Then it got complicated. We had to do it again for William, then Sophia. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being clinical. We developed feelings. 15 years of feelings," I said bitterly, while I remained the oblivious husband, the convenient provider. "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "I did love you, James. I still do, in my way. You've been an amazing father, a good husband." She looked up at me then, tears in her eyes. I was afraid of losing everything. You, the children, our life together. And yes, afraid of hurting you with a truth that seemed unnecessary as long as everyone was happy. Except I wasn't really happy, was I? I said quietly. I was living in a constructed reality, a carefully maintained illusion. That's not happiness, Vanessa. That's imprisonment. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. What do you want from me now? The truth. No more lies, no more manipulation. Sign the agreement. Give me joint custody of the children. Let's end this as cleanly as possible. I felt a surge of anger at her concern for him. Daniel will face the consequences of his choices, just as we all will. When we returned to the main conference room, the atmosphere had shifted. My mother sat rigidly in her chair, her face a mask of disapproval. Daniel looked defeated, his lawyer whispering intently in his ear. We'll sign, Vanessa announced, her voice steady despite her reddened eyes. Daniel nodded reluctantly. On one condition. The retroactive child support is excessive. I want it limited to the past 5 years. 10 years, non-negotiable, I countered, with a payment plan structured over the next decade. After more legal haggling, all 3 eventually signed the agreement. As pens scratched across paper, I felt a curious sense of detachment. This formal acknowledgement of betrayal should have felt more momentous, but instead it felt like merely closing a chapter in a book I was eager to finish. Before they left, I had one final message. I've written letters to Emma, William, and Sophia explaining the situation in age-appropriate ways. I'd appreciate if you'd all respect their right to process this information without additional manipulation. My mother stood, gathering her purse. You think you've won something today, James, but vindictiveness has never brought anyone peace. I met her gaze steadily. This isn't about winning, Mother. It's about truth. Something this family has been sorely lacking. As they filed out, Attorney Marshall clasped my shoulder. You held your ground admirably. Not many could have maintained such composure. I've had months to prepare, I replied, and stronger motivation than they could imagine. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. For the first time since that fateful doctor's appointment, I felt a sense of solid ground beneath my feet. The path forward was clear, even if it wouldn't be easy. When my phone rang and Emma's name appeared on the screen, I took a deep breath before answering. Dad? Her voice sounded small, younger than her 17 years. Mom just told us about the agreement, that we'll be splitting time between houses. I guess. She paused. William's really upset. He says he doesn't know who he is anymore. My heart ached for my son, because regardless of DNA, he was my son. Tell him I'll be there tomorrow, and we can talk about it. All of us. This doesn't change who any of you are. It just changes what you know. Dad? Emma's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I got your letter, the one explaining everything, and I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. After hanging up, I remained on the balcony until stars appeared in the darkening sky. The confrontation that had consumed my thoughts for months was over. Now came the harder part, rebuilding a life of authenticity from the ashes of deception. The weeks that followed the settlement were a delicate balancing act between legal proceedings and emotional support for my children. The divorce moved forward with surprising efficiency, thanks to the signed agreement. Vanessa and I sold our house, splitting the proceeds equally, and I purchased a 3-bedroom townhouse closer to the children's schools. Daniel, true to form, fought the child support arrangement despite his signature on the agreement, forcing additional legal battles that strained both our finances and the already fragile family dynamics. My mother retreated into icy silence, refusing to speak to me directly and communicating with the children only through stiff, formal visits that left them confused and hurt. Emma, my eldest, became my unexpected rock during this turbulent time. At 17, she processed the revelations with a maturity that astounded me, channeling her anger into academic excellence and college applications. I want to study psychology, she told me one evening as we worked on her essays. I want to understand why people lie to the ones they claim to love. William struggled the most visibly. His grades plummeted, and he began acting out, skipping soccer practice, talking back to teachers, picking fights with classmates. The school counselor recommended therapy, which he initially resisted fiercely. Therapy isn't for crazy people, I explained, parking outside the nondescript office building. It's for people dealing with difficult situations. And finding out your entire family history isn't what you thought. That's about as difficult as it gets. He scoffed, arms crossed defensively across his chest. You're not even my real dad. Why do you care? The words stung, but I recognized them for what they were, a wounded child's attempt to push away someone before they could be abandoned. William, look at me, I said firmly, turning in my seat to face him. I am your dad in every way that matters. DNA doesn't make a father. Showing up does. Loving does. And nothing will ever stop me from being your dad. His tough facade cracked, just slightly, as tears welled in his eyes. He didn't speak, but he did get out of the car and attend the session. It was a small victory, but I clung to it. Sophia, at 7, vacillated between obliviousness to the deeper implications, and acute awareness of the emotional currents swirling around her. She developed a habit of carrying a family photo, taken at her 5th birthday, in her backpack, occasionally pulling it out to study our smiling faces, as if searching for clues to when everything changed. One Saturday morning, as she sat at my kitchen table coloring while I made pancakes, she asked abruptly, Dad, if Uncle Daniel is really my dad, why didn't he want to live with us? I turned off the stove and sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. It's complicated, sweetie. Uncle Daniel and Mom made some grown-up decisions a long time ago that weren't honest. But none of those decisions were about not wanting you. Yes, I agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And that's the one thing in this whole situation I'm grateful for. Because being your dad has been the greatest joy of my life. She considered this, then nodded solemnly. I'm glad you're my dad too, even if it's not biologic-y. Biological, I corrected with a smile, my heart lightening for the first time in weeks. That's what I said, she insisted, returning to her coloring with the matter settled in her mind. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own identity beyond the betrayal. I returned to martial arts training, finding catharsis in the physical discipline and mindfulness it required. I joined a support group for men dealing with infidelity, where I could speak freely about my experiences without fear of judgment or pity. It was in this group that I met Dr. Leon Farrell, a urologist specializing in male fertility issues. After hearing my story, he approached me after a meeting. Have you considered getting a second opinion about your condition? He asked. Medicine has advanced considerably in the past 15 years, he explained. What was once considered permanent infertility can sometimes be addressed with new surgical techniques or medication protocols. This possibility had never occurred to me, that the medical foundation of the entire deception might itself be incorrect or outdated. I made an appointment at Dr. Farrell's clinic the following week. After extensive testing, Dr. Farrell confirmed my condition, obstructive azoospermia caused by a congenital absence of the vas deferens, but offered an unexpected ray of hope. Your sperm production is actually normal, he explained, pointing to test results. The issue is that the sperm never reaches the ejaculate due to the missing vas deferens. With a simple procedure called microsurgical epididymal sperm aspiration, we could retrieve viable sperm directly from the epididymis for use in assisted reproduction. You're saying I could father a child? Biologically? The possibility was staggering. With the help of IVF, absolutely, he confirmed. Your infertility is structural, not functional. I left his office in a daze, emotions warring within me. On one hand, the confirmation that I could have fathered children with appropriate medical intervention only deepened the betrayal I'd experienced. If only my mother had told me the truth. If only Vanessa and I had consulted fertility specialists together, my life might have taken a radically different course. On the other hand, the knowledge opened possibilities for my future that I had never allowed myself to consider. At 43, I was still young enough to potentially start another family someday, if I met the right person. When I shared this information with my therapist, Dr. Winters, she helped me process the complex emotions it triggered. It's natural to feel anger about the opportunities that were taken from you through deception, she said. But try to focus on what this means for your future rather than dwelling on what might have been. I'm not sure I want more children, I admitted. After everything that's happened. You don't need to make any decisions now, she reminded me. Just know that your options are more open than you believed. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I encountered Vanessa unexpectedly at a school function for Sophia. We had been carefully avoiding each other at drop-offs and pickups, communicating primarily through text messages about scheduling and the children's needs. She looked tired, I noticed, the confident realtor polish somewhat dimmed. James, she acknowledged with a nod, Sophia's excited about her part in the play. She's been practicing her lines non-stop, I replied, maintaining a polite distance. An awkward silence fell between us before she asked, How are you doing? Really? I considered deflecting, but decided on honesty. Better. It's been a process, but I'm finding my feet again. She nodded, looking away briefly before meeting my eyes again. I want you to know I'm sorry, not just for the affair, but for the years of deception. You deserved better. It was the first genuine apology she had offered, free from justifications or explanations. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. The children miss you when they're with me, she continued, especially William. He won't admit it, but he checks the countdown calendar to your weekends every day. This small insight into my son's inner world meant more than any apology. I miss them too, every minute. As we parted ways to find our seats, something subtle had shifted. The raw wound of betrayal hadn't healed entirely, but it had begun to scab over, making room for something beyond anger and grief. Around this time, my personal training sessions at the gym introduced me to Cassandra, a nutrition coach and single mother of a teenage daughter. Our initial conversations revolved around fitness goals and meal planning, but gradually expanded to include books, music, and eventually, our respective divorce stories. Mine was boring by comparison, she joked, after I shared an abbreviated version of my experience. Just the standard grew apart and couldn't find our way back together scenario. There was something refreshingly straightforward about Cassandra. No hidden agendas, no elaborate deceptions, just authentic communication and clear boundaries. When she eventually asked me to dinner, I surprised myself by accepting. Fair warning, I told her on our first date. I'm still working through some trust issues. She smiled, raising her glass of wine. Fair warning back. I have a pathological need for honesty that some find off-putting. So we might be perfect for each other. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately, with none of the whirlwind intensity that had characterized my courtship with Vanessa. Cassandra understood my need to move cautiously and respected the priority I placed on time with my children. Emma, predictably, was suspicious of Cassandra at first, subjecting her to intense scrutiny when they finally met 4 months into our relationship. William maintained aloof disinterest, while Sophia embraced her immediately, enchanted by Cassandra's colorful tattoos and ability to braid hair in elaborate styles. She seems genuine, Emma conceded after dinner at my townhouse. Not like she's trying too hard or hiding anything. That's exactly what I appreciate about her, I replied, grateful for my daughter's perceptiveness. As my personal life stabilized, my professional trajectory also shifted. The accounting firm where I'd worked for 15 years offered a partnership track, but the prospect no longer appealed to me. The years of living someone else's carefully scripted life had left me with a fierce desire for authenticity and meaningful work. After much consideration, I left the firm to start a financial counseling practice focused on helping people recover from economic abuse and financial infidelity, using my professional skills to assist others navigating situations painfully similar to what I had experienced. The first client who came to me was a woman in her 50s whose husband had hidden gambling debts for decades, depleting their retirement savings and remortgaging their home without her knowledge. I don't just need financial advice, she told me, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. I need to know how to trust again, myself mostly. I keep asking how I could have been so blind. You weren't blind, I assured her, the words resonating with my own healing journey. You were trusting. There's a difference. And now we're going to rebuild that trust in yourself, one step at a time. As I guided her through creating financial safeguards and rebuilding her economic independence, I found a profound sense of purpose that had been missing from my corporate career. Each client who walked through my door reinforced the conviction that even the darkest experiences could be transformed into something meaningful. 9 months after the divorce, Daniel attempted to reconnect with the children, his initial legal hostility giving way to what appeared to be genuine remorse. Should I let them see him? I asked Dr. Winters during a session. Part of me wants to refuse out of spite. The question isn't about what Daniel deserves, she replied thoughtfully. It's about what your children need. They're old enough to have a say in this decision. Following her advice, I discussed it with each child individually. Emma flatly refused, still processing her anger at both Daniel and Vanessa. William, surprisingly, wanted to meet with him. I have questions, he explained simply. Sophia was curious but nervous, agreeing only if I would be present. I set clear boundaries with Daniel before allowing these meetings, making it abundantly clear that any attempt to undermine my relationship with the children would result in immediate termination of contact. To his credit, he agreed to my terms without argument. Watching William cautiously build a relationship with the man who was his biological father was one of the most difficult challenges I faced. It required setting aside my ego, my hurt, and focusing solely on what William needed for his own healing journey. You can have relationships with both of us, I assured him after his third meeting with Daniel. It doesn't have to be a competition or a choice. He told me about when you were kids, William said hesitantly, how you always stood up for him when other kids bullied him. We were close once, I acknowledged, the memories bittersweet. Before all of this, William considered this, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. Do you hate him now? I chose my words carefully, knowing they would matter. I was very angry for a long time. Parts of me still are. But hate requires energy that I'd rather invest in the people I love, like you, our sisters, and the life we're building now. Forgiveness is a process, I explained. I'm working on it, not for his sake, but for my own peace. Real forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means refusing to let it control your future. These conversations with my children about complex emotional truths became the unexpected silver lining of our family upheaval. We were developing a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect that might never have evolved within the constraints of our previous family dynamic. 1 year to the day after my confrontation at the dinner party, I received a call that my mother had suffered a severe stroke. Despite our estrangement, I went immediately to the hospital, finding her diminished and fragile in the ICU bed, machines monitoring her vital signs. Daniel was already there, his face drawn with worry. We acknowledged each other with tense nods, but managed to set aside our conflict to focus on our mother's condition. The neurologist was direct. The damage is extensive. If she survives, she'll likely have significant cognitive and physical impairments. For 3 days, Daniel and I maintained an uneasy vigil, taking shifts so she was never alone, finding neutral topics like hospital food and parking challenges to fill the awkward silences between us. On the third night, as I sat beside her bed reading aloud from her favorite Jane Austen novel, she opened her eyes and focused on me with surprising clarity. Whether she was asking for forgiveness or telling me to forgive, I couldn't be sure. But I took her hand gently, feeling the bird-like fragility of her bones beneath paper-thin skin. I'm working on it, I told her, the same words I'd used with William. Rest now. She squeezed my hand weakly before drifting back to sleep. 3 days later, she passed peacefully with both her sons at her bedside, our shared grief temporarily transcending the chasm between us. After the funeral, Daniel approached me as I stood alone by our mother's grave. I know I have no right to ask, he began hesitantly, but is there any chance we could eventually find a way forward? Not for my sake, but for the children. For what's left of our family. I studied him, my half-brother, my betrayer, the biological father of my children, and felt the weight of our complicated history pressing down on both of us. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'm not closing the door entirely. Time will tell. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement that healing might eventually include some form of reconciliation, however limited or redefined. As spring turned to summer that year, my life settled into new patterns. Co-parenting with Vanessa became more functional, if never truly comfortable. My relationship with Cassandra deepened into something built on mutual respect and transparent communication. My practice grew, allowing me to help others reclaim their financial autonomy after betrayal. Most importantly, my connections with Emma, William, and Sophia strengthened, weathering the storms of our family reconfiguration and emerging more authentic and resilient. One evening, as Cassandra and I prepared dinner together in my townhouse kitchen, she asked unexpectedly, "Have you ever thought about having more children?" The question caught me off guard. Yes, actually. I've been thinking about it since discovering my condition might be treatable. She nodded, focusing intently on the vegetables she was chopping. My daughter's heading to college next year. I always wanted more children, but the timing never seemed right after the divorce. She set down her knife, meeting my eyes directly. I'm saying it's a conversation I'd be open to having, when you're ready. The possibility hung between us. Another chance, another path, another family built on honesty from the beginning. I'd like that, I said finally. Not immediately, but someday. If we decide it's right for both of us. She smiled, returning to her chopping. No rush. We're building something good here, one authentic step at a time. That night, after Cassandra went home, I sat on my balcony looking at the stars, reflecting on the journey of the past 18 months. The man I had been, trusting, oblivious, defined by others' deceptions, was gone forever. In his place stood someone stronger, more discerning, yet still capable of hope. The inheritance of lies had nearly destroyed me, but in surviving that destruction, I had discovered something unexpected. The capacity to rebuild with greater wisdom, to love with clearer boundaries, to parent with more deliberate honesty. My children would inherit that truth instead, the knowledge that authenticity, however painful, is always preferable to comfortable deception. That healing doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing not to be defined by your wounds. That second chances are possible, even after betrayal burns everything familiar to the ground. It wasn't the life I had planned. But standing in the ashes of what was lost, I had found something perhaps more valuable, the uncompromising determination to live by my own truth, whatever came next. 2 years after that fateful doctor's appointment, I stood in another medical office, watching a different doctor study different test results. Dr. Farrell smiled as he turned the computer screen toward me. The procedure was successful, James. Your sperm count and motility are excellent. From a fertility standpoint, you're good to go whenever you and Cassandra decide to try. I stared at the numbers and percentages on the screen, still somewhat disbelieving that this possibility existed for me. And there are no increased risks because of my condition? None whatsoever, he assured me. Once the sperm is retrieved, the IVF process is standard. Your particular issue doesn't affect the quality of the sperm themselves, just their pathway out of the body. As I left his office, I felt a profound sense of reclaiming something that had been taken from me. Not just fertility, but agency, the right to make informed choices about my own body and future. Cassandra and I had married 6 months earlier in a small ceremony attended by our children, close friends, and even, somewhat surprisingly, Daniel and his new girlfriend. William had served as my best man, Emma as Cassandra's maid of honor, and Sophia as an enthusiastic flower girl who took her duties so seriously she nearly ran out of petals before reaching the altar. Our honeymoon had been a family affair, a 2-week trip to Costa Rica with all 4 children, blending our families through shared adventures rather than romantic isolation. It set the tone for our marriage, practical, inclusive, focused on building connections rather than fulfilling conventional expectations. Now, with medical confirmation of my fertility options, we began serious discussions about adding to our family. "I want to be sure this is what you want," I told Cassandra one evening as we sat on our back deck watching the sunset. "Not just something you think I need for closure or healing." She took my hand, her expression thoughtful. "Having another child would be a gift for both of us, not therapy for past wounds. But only if you're truly ready." "I think I am," I realized aloud. Not to replace what I lost or to prove something, but because I love our life together and want to expand it. The IVF process was arduous, with its clinical precision and emotional roller coaster of hope and disappointment. After 2 failed embryo transfers, we agreed to try once more before considering other options. The morning Cassandra took the pregnancy test, we sat together on the bathroom floor, fingers intertwined as we waited for the results. "No matter what it says," she whispered, "we already have a beautiful family." When 2 pink lines appeared clearly on the plastic stick, we both cried. Tears of joy tinged with the awareness of everything it had taken to reach this moment. At the first ultrasound appointment, the technician moved the wand across Cassandra's still flat stomach, then paused, adjusting the angle slightly before breaking into a smile. "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, it looks like we have a strong heartbeat. Congratulations." On the screen, a tiny fluttering pulse marked the beginning of new life. Life that carried my DNA, created with full knowledge and honest intention. The technician shook her head. "Too early. We'll know in a few more weeks if you want to find out." "I do," I said immediately, surprising myself. With my other children, I had wanted the surprise at birth. But this time felt different. This time, I wanted every piece of information, every choice made with complete awareness. When we learned we were having a son, the reality of this new beginning became even more tangible. We named him Thomas Timothy Miller, Thomas after Cassandra's father, Timothy after mine. Emma, now in her 2nd year of college studying psychology, reacted to the news of her impending half-brother with thoughtful support. "It's weird, but in a good way," she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "Like our family keeps expanding in ways none of us could have predicted." William, at 14, was more practically concerned. "I'm not babysitting, just so we're clear," he declared, though the way he later researched the best gaming systems for when the kid gets older revealed his underlying excitement. Sophia, at 9, was unambiguously thrilled, immediately appointing herself official big sister in training and creating elaborate welcome drawings for the baby's room. Vanessa's reaction was subdued but gracious when I shared the news with her during a parent-teacher conference. "I'm happy for you, James," she said sincerely. "You deserve this." Daniel's response came in the form of a handcrafted wooden crib delivered to our house with a simple card. "For my nephew. Wishing your family every happiness." The gesture represented our cautiously rebuilding relationship, never returning to what it had been, but evolving into something new, defined by clearer boundaries and hard-earned wisdom. My mother had not lived to see this reconciliation, or to meet her youngest grandchild. But in her final weeks, we had reached a fragile peace that allowed me to grieve her loss, without the added weight of unresolved anger. Thomas came into the world on a crisp autumn morning after 14 hours of labor, his lusty cries filling the delivery room as Cassandra squeezed my hand with exhausted triumph. When the nurse placed him in my arms, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of undeniable miracle, I studied his tiny features with wonder. Unlike my experience with Emma, William, and Sophia, there was no subconscious searching for resemblance, no need to confirm connection through physical similarities. I knew with absolute certainty that this child was biologically mine, yet that knowledge felt almost incidental compared to the overwhelming love that flooded through me. "He's perfect," I whispered to Cassandra, who watched us with tired eyes and a radiant smile. In that moment, I understood what she meant. The perfection wasn't in the DNA or the medical triumph over infertility. It was in the authenticity of our journey, the hard-won honesty that allowed us to build this family with open eyes and whole hearts. 6 months later, as I rocked Thomas to sleep in the nursery while monitoring a video call where Emma presented her research on childhood resilience, I reflected on the unlikely path that had led me here. The devastating betrayal that could have destroyed me had instead forced me to rebuild myself on a foundation of unwavering truth. My phone buzzed with a text from William. "Got an A on that history project. Thanks for the help last weekend." Simple words that represented our evolving relationship. no longer shadowed by questions of biology, but strengthened by mutual choice and effort. Later that evening, when all the children were asleep, Cassandra joined me on the porch swing, handing me a glass of wine as she settled beside me. "I was just thinking about scars," I replied. "How they mark where we've been wounded, but also where we've healed." She nodded, understanding as she always did. "Some of the strongest parts of us are where we've had to repair ourselves." "Exactly." I took her hand, our wedding bands catching the soft porch light. 3 years ago, I thought my life was ending. I couldn't imagine surviving what happened, let alone finding joy again. I considered the question, looking through the window where Thomas slept peacefully in his crib, then at the family photos lining our hallway, Emma in her graduation cap, William scoring the winning goal, Sophia riding her bike without training wheels, Cassandra's daughter Lily in her prom dress, all of us together at the wedding. Now I know that the truth, however painful, sets us free in ways deception never can, I said finally. I lost the life I thought I had, but I gained one that's authentically mine. As our glasses clinked, I felt the settled certainty of a man who had walked through fire and emerged transformed, not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and ultimately profoundly grateful for the painful awakening that had led me home to myself at last. The inheritance my children would now receive wasn't the legacy of lies that had shaped my past, but the enduring power of truth, resilience, and the courage to begin again. That, I had come to believe, was the most valuable gift I could offer them. An example of a man who had faced betrayal, not with bitterness, but with the determined resolve to build something better from the ashes of what was lost. And in that resolution, I had discovered the most unexpected outcome of all, genuine peace.